City Current. Produced by Dakota Media Access. In-depth discussion with Bismarck and Mandan city officials. Watch on Government Access Channel 602 HD or tune in to Radio Access 102.5 FM. Always local, always current.
Welcome to City Current. I'm Tom Gerhardt from Dakota Media Access. Joining me, as always, following Bismarck City Commission meetings, is City Administrator Jason Tomanek. Good to have you.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
And, following up on that meeting last night, we have some of the things we'll be talking about. BSC Homecoming Street closure. And with that, a lot of fun events that we'll tell you about. Had the 2026 budget finalized last night, but several interesting nuggets came out of that discussion. And Ben Arith, the Community Development Director, has resigned. We'll take a look at what's happening in the future with that position and department. But let's start with this BSC street closure. I'm a BSC graduate, homecoming, end of the month, and they're going to close off part of a street and have a pretty nice event.
Part of Schaefer Street, yes. And the reason it came to the City Commission is like many of the other street closures that are not related to construction. It does take commission action. Ultimately, it's a recommendation from our city engineer, and there's a process that any organization would go through to request a street closure. But the request was granted, no questions asked. So Tuesday, September 30th is BSC has coined it Party on Schaefer. So Schaefer Street, obviously one of the roads that run through campus. There will be a variety of activities, including axe throwing, snacks. Sounds like Furry Friends Rock and Rescue is going to be there. And I believe there's even an event called Pie the Professor.
Now we might have to show up for this.
I'm an alum myself, so
pie throwing.
There we go.
I don't think any of the professors are still there from my days at BSC, but maybe take out some old aggressions and find some good pie, perhaps.
Yes, sounds like fun.
Also, wanted to talk about, and you mentioned this is a pretty cool deal. Police department has a drone program, and someone decided to step up and make a donation from outside the police department.
Correct. So I guess procedurally, anytime somebody wishes to donate items of significant value to the city of Bismarck, the departments have to request permission to accept these donations. And so that's a fairly common practice with our police department. People are very generous and support law enforcement, often fire department as well. But in this situation, it's unique. A gentleman named Paul Adams gifted the Bismarck Police Department $2,000 to be used to enhance the city's drone program. And the drone program is used by law enforcement primarily to keep officers and the public as safe as they can. And there's a number of different ways that the drone pilots will use the drones in responding to emergency situations. And this particular gentleman, Mr. Adams, has a relation to one of the officers within our organization and was compelled to share some of his gift with us. And so we certainly say thank you for that. And I know it'll be put to good use. This drone program has been one of the ways our police department has evolved with technology to maybe avoid having additional staff. We can have technological resources that make the current staff better and more effective with the work that they're doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned right off the bat safety for the officers and community members. This is a pretty easy and effective way to monitor situations without putting people in harm's way.
Correct.
So appreciate that kind of donation and thoughtfulness toward the police department. The regular agenda, the big item last night, the 2026 budget finalized, and this was the heavy-duty item last night. And several things came up during the discussion, but the big one, I guess, is, and this probably doesn't happen frequently, but decision was made to add a full-time employee to the municipal court, add that into the budget on the night the budget's finalized. That's not a typical situation.
Not a typical situation. However, they are able to move things around without increasing the budget. They can decrease the budget, but they cannot increase the budget. And so by essentially eliminating a few things, they're able to add different things. And Municipal Court Judge Amanda Harris came forward with her request to the commission, and the request was for an additional staff person. And Judge Harris came forward with a lot of information about some of the increases in the number of cases that municipal court is dealing with. There's an increase in warrants. There's just an uptick in the community. And we have been having these discussions internally about how, again, to try and implement more technology in the courtroom to really alleviate some of the burden or maybe some of the repetitive motions that the staff are doing when it comes to paperwork and all the corresponding work that happens after a court case. One of the things that I think Judge Harris pointed out was, as she referred to it, an unfunded mandate. And so this was a change that resulted from this year's legislative session. Courts in North Dakota, municipal courts, now have to become a court of record. And it's still a little unclear exactly what that means, but it boils down to the availability of transcripts or some sort of recording of a trial or a court hearing, a proceeding that would go on, and it would be any person's ability to request that type of a transcript. And so those sorts of things aren't happening today, but it is something that we will have to comply with going forward. I believe the implementation date is in 2026, if I'm not mistaken, so we're still working through some of those
Sure.
pieces. But it was the judge's belief and essentially testimony to the commissioners that by adding staff, it might help relieve some of the burden today on the staff that are there, the clerks that are there doing the work, but then also prepare for the changes that are coming with the court of record as it becomes implementable in the near future.
I think she threw some statistics out about somewhere around 100,000 cases for the municipal court in the last 5 years in Bismarck, which was more comparatively than Grand Forks, Fargo, West Fargo, and then I want to say she said something about 23,000 cases last year, somewhere in that neighborhood, and that excluded parking citations and things. So definitely a heavy workload, as we know, for the municipal court.
Right, and Judge Harris, to her credit, is fairly new in her position. She was elected in 2024, obviously taking the position after Judge Severin held the bench for 42 years. And we knew, I think everybody knew, there were going to be changes. There have to be changes after that amount of time. And some of the staff that worked with Judge Severin also retired. So there was a pretty sizable generational shift in municipal court. We're doing our best to work together to figure out where can technology help, but then also in this situation, maybe an extra set of hands is really part of the solution here.
And if I understood right, this position now becomes available to hire, but they wouldn't have to either.
Correct. There's still an evaluation process as we work through, the initial phases of implementing some of the software, but then also it would be the responsibility of the judge and the staff to come back and demonstrate the need for staff. And as Commissioner Cleary pointed out last night, there are many departments that have requested additional staff for years without getting any additional staff. And so historically, our initial response is to try and solve some of these problems in other ways. And the reason for that isn't to punish a department or withhold any of the assets that they need to be successful. It's to recognize that every time you add an additional staff person to our workforce, that is a forever cost that will likely not go away. I don't recall very many times when we have eliminated staff because their role is no longer needed. We would reassign them or find a new opportunity for them to work within the organization, but to simply just eliminate the staff because the workload isn't there, I don't see that as something happening in the court system either. So we understand the need, we understand the request, and the commission supported the request with the condition that more information come forward. The budget committee would ultimately make a recommendation after we've pushed a few more buttons and pulled a few more levers to see how things are hopefully improving.
And just to reiterate what you said at the beginning, last night, couldn't add to the city budget, but you could move pieces around.
Right.
So one of the efforts, Commissioner Risch brought up the idea of the fire department wants to buy a newer Expedition. They have one, I think a 2012 model. He made a motion, which was seconded, to remove that from this year's budget as a cost-saving measure. That eventually failed.
Correct. And the idea there was to use a one-time cost to purchase a vehicle and essentially create that as the seed money for the first year of salary. Well, I understand the thought process there, but again, we're buying a vehicle one time versus paying an employee annually. And the concern would then be, you can pay for the salary the first year, but you have to find a way to continue to pay for it in the future, or you will continue to borrow from some of those other one-time costs. The other thing, and I think it's worth noting, Commissioner Cleary, who holds the finance portfolio and sat through all of these meetings with the staff and the departments and other electeds along the way, noted that the City of Bismarck has developed a fleet plan through our fleet manager, Kurt O'Neill. Kurt and his team have done a phenomenal job recognizing the lifespan of the assets that we use. And when I use the word assets, I'm talking about things with wheels, the equipment that provides services, snow removal, garbage trucks. We've got hundreds of assets that Kurt and his staff manage and maintain and essentially sell to other organizations when they have served their useful purpose for us. In this situation, the vehicle that is within the fire department today, it's a command vehicle, a suburban style. It has exceeded its useful life based on the metrics that Kurt and his team have prepared. Commissioner Risch, I totally understand where he is as well. He's a car guy in his own way, and we have learned that he is very mindful when it comes to city finances, and if there's an opportunity to save some money and move some things around, he's certainly going to recommend that and suggest that. And so it was a good discussion between kind of the two theories of how we approach these things, but ultimately there will be a way to fund the position that was approved for municipal court. Fire department will be likely purchasing the vehicle that they are anticipating in the future, and that vehicle they have today would get sold or traded off at a local auction site in one way or another. So it was an interesting discussion.
And I think healthy alternate perspectives do bring good discussion to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, generally arrive at the right conclusion, I would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting part of the conversation last night was, employee compensation. It's extremely important. I know in the city, from what I've understood, the city of Bismarck is probably behind some other places in North Dakota in terms of pay and compensation, things like that. So Commissioner Risch also brought up an idea, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm knowledgeable enough to discuss the details, but pool of 3% of money. The idea was he wanted to get some people at the low end a little higher pay, and just a flat 3% or 4% raise.
Right.
Just doesn't really help out some people in his mind.
The way I understood it, his intentions was to say 3% across the board. So that is
Everybody.
We'll just use a number, we'll say $2,000. That goes to every single employee, full-time employee. There's 670 plus. Then there was an additional 2%, and that would be up to the supervisors to distribute based on merit. And so if you have a high performer and you want to be able to compensate them a little bit more, that's the portion of merit that can be used. And this is all part of our annual evaluation process, which we are going through right now. Every full-time employee gets evaluated, from the administrator all the way to somebody that's been here for 6 months. And that process happens every fall, and then it leads to these types of discussions on salary compensation and benefits. And so Commissioner Risch's point was, if it's 3%, someone at the top of the scale, their 3% is a much higher number than somebody that's just entering the pay scale. And I can appreciate that. It's another theory. It's another way to approach things. And ultimately, that was a motion that was made, but it did fail 2 votes to 3. And just to kind of close out that conversation about where did we land with salaries, the commission approved the budget as presented. And so the budget committee came forward with a recommendation of 3%. Some would call that a cost of living adjustment, a COLA. So all the salary ranges will move up 3%. Everyone that is in those categories, their salaries would be adjusted 3%. But then there's the additional 2% for merit as well. And so that's up to the supervisors to distribute, again, based on performance, meeting expectations, and so on.
Another idea brought to the table last night was to freeze commissioners' pay for 2026, which would include the mayor, and that actually passed 4-1.
It did, and there was, again, good discussion back and forth on the merit of doing something like that. I don't have the salaries in front of me, but I did share with the commissioners last night that we did some comparisons with other like-sized cities. Bismarck is quite low in that category of what do we pay the elected officials. Ultimately, the money that they chose to freeze, understand why. In the grand scheme of things, in our $300+ million budget, it's a fairly inconsequential number, but it also does resonate with a lot of people, I'm sure, to say, I got elected to make a change in this community. I didn't get elected to get paid. And so I think that's kind of where they're at. I'm not going to question the theory behind that. I understand why they did it, and it went, like you said, 4-1.
And then ultimately, finally, the 2026 budget was approved as well, and so that's put to bed moving into next year.
Right, yeah, and we're grateful. It's kind of a sigh of relief for those of us that are part of the budget committee.
It's a long process.
It is. It starts in March for some folks, and our finance department does a tremendous amount of work to help all the departments get ready. They're really doing all the lion's share of the work behind the scenes, and then the departments slog through this process, and it does take a lot to get to this point. It's different every year, and last night was no surprise. I'm always interested in the number of citizens that engage in these types of things, and we just had the one comment really from the municipal court judge. It is worth noting there were several people in the room, both city staff and just general residents, that were curious, and I appreciate that. I'm glad that they engage. I hope what they were expecting from the meeting, I hope they learned some things. I hope if they had questions, they left with those questions answered. If not, as staff, we're happy to try and walk through that. I know we had a number of people come by our office. Those of us that own property or live in Bismarck, we all got a letter from the auditor's office, and that letter prescribed the dates and times of what those public hearings would be happening. That letter prompted a few people to come by our office and say, I'd like to see the budget. And so we had an opportunity to walk through that and answer some questions. And so another way of how transparency in government is working. So glad for everybody that took some time to get involved and share their thoughts. Not everybody left smiling, I'm sure. There's probably some things that people were hoping for that didn't get approved. But in the end, we need to say this, we have a balanced budget for 2026. Our staff, our resources, our facilities will all be appropriately cared for, and I'm grateful for everyone's time and thoughts and input and feedback that went into the whole process.
Some other business last night, Community Development Director Ben Arith has resigned. I think you said his last day is later this week.
Friday the 12th.
And you named an acting director for now, and then you told the commission that you're going to use some time to evaluate before you decide to assess the future, I guess, before you determine a course forward.
Right, and so for those that may not know, I spent my first 10 years in the community development department as a planner, and so that's where I really learned a lot about the organization, and I learned the functionality of how that department works with all the others to support the growth of Bismarck. And as a community, as a capital city, we continue to add people. We add 1,000 people a year. We've been doing that for the last 20 years. Growth is very important to us as an organization because it enables us to continue to grow and provide the services that this community is demanding. And with Ben's departure, it leaves a big hole, but it also gives us an opportunity to look around at what other people and talents we have in the organization. Are there other needs? I'm not suggesting we're going to blow up the department and dismantle it. That's not it at all. We absolutely need building inspections. We absolutely need planning. We absolutely need the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the HUD programs that are all running through community development today. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't stop and just ask a few questions, look around, and make sure that what we're going to do is the next best thing for the organization, the staff, and the department itself. So we are a better community because Ben was here. He leaves a great team behind. Ben is a very talented leader. I think the staff would go to the end of the earth for him. And the next place where they'll be moving away from Bismarck, the next community where he lands they're lucky to have him because it'll be a better place because he's there too. So,
a couple other nuggets from last night, the future calendar discussion, and just a couple of housekeeping notes. In November, Veterans Day is a Tuesday, so that meeting is going to move to Thursday that week. In December, you're going to go down to one meeting, December 16th, because of all the Christmas.
Right.
Yeah, just a busy time of year. And then we wanted to remind people that September 17th, the combined Bismarck-Burley Commission will meet on the ETA at 5 p.m.
In the Tom Baker room, so that'll be all 5 city commissioners and I believe all 5 county commissioners. This will be the second time in a couple of months that they've met. Broad topic is the extraterritorial area, ETA for a lot of people. We're going to share some information. There was a request at the last meeting to come back with information from the city's perspective. We have a program that is referred to as utility capital charges. It is a fee for constructing new property, and it is essentially the utility department's way of recognizing you're buying into all of this infrastructure that many of us have been paying for years. It's your way of helping to support the water utility infrastructure. So Michael Mart, our utility operations director, will provide some background on that and how that program works. And it came from this system that we had a system called holding costs in abeyance. And if there were utility costs that were going past properties outside city limits, we would hold those costs until those properties annexed and then turn around and say, here's the cost of putting the pipe in the street for you 10 years ago. You're using it now. Thank you very much for helping to contribute. That system is a little different, but Commissioner Connolly was looking for some clarification on that. Some of the county commissioners indicated that it would be helpful for them to understand. It's, in my mind, it's not necessarily an ETA issue, because ETA is more zoning and land use, but it does kind of overlap because we are talking about properties outside city limits. So I can see for some how there is a correlation there. So we'll bring that forward. Daniel Nairn from the planning group will be bringing forward a map with some potential revisions to the extraterritorial area. Our staff has met with county staff, shared some ideas of subdivisions that may be to the point where they're almost fully built out, and there's really not a lot left for development in those areas. So that'll be shared with the county commissioners as well.
One final note, Airport Manager Greg Haug came forward, sounds like in the late hours of Monday or Tuesday afternoon. He received a notice from the FAA that they could receive over $8.5 million in grant money to help upgrade, pavement rehab, I think was the word he used, pavement lighting at the airport.
Yep.
But he needed to give an answer by later this week.
Yes, and so this happens from time to time with the FAA. They get close to the end of their fiscal year, and there are grants for other places that did not get utilized. So in order to make that grant opportunity available for other communities, they'll find projects that are in the queue. And we have a project that's in the queue. It is the crosswind runway, I believe, and there's some concrete rehab that needs to be done. In order for Greg and a department of the city, in order for the airport to accept this grant, they need commission approval. And so it was a very, very last minute thing. I think Greg called me about 4:30 on Tuesday before the meeting and said, hey, can we get this added? And anytime there's an opportunity for a grant, we will do our best to put it on the agenda. And so he did a nice job letting the commissioners know where the money would come from, how it's coming to Bismarck, and then essentially how we would utilize it. And so we'll hear a little bit more about this one as the project evolves. There will be bidding and contractors involved and things like that. But yes, $8.6 million grant going towards the runway rehab project at the airport.
Some good news for people on East Century as we look at our street construction update map, at least tell you where to go to see the latest, but traffic is flowing. You said Knife River said traffic's flowing both directions.
Yep, there was a drone video that was posted on our social media of East Century Avenue. If you haven't been in the northeast corner of town, I would encourage you to navigate your way over there. You might see a part of Bismarck you've never seen before. We've got some roads that go in places they hadn't. So very interesting, very grateful for the work that's getting done over there. And again, that is a project that was paid for using the half-cent sales tax. That was a voter-approved initiative back in 2018. There's a number of projects that have been paid for using that half-cent sales tax, including 43rd Avenue, South Washington Street last year with the roundabout at Burley Avenue. So those are projects that do not have special assessments. They are benefiting many of us, if not all of us in the community. And it's all through the contributions of sales tax from people that are shopping in Bismarck.
Finally, we want to remind you to download our apps. You can follow Dakota Media Access, our programming, or any of our government meetings, or if you want to play them back, download the app to check that out. And then Radio Access 102.5 has lots of great music artists and podcasts. That wraps up this edition of City Current. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
For more information on what was discussed in this episode of City Current, visit bismarcknd.gov or call 701-355-1300. If you have suggestions, comments, or issues you would like addressed in future episodes, contact us at info@freetv.org. This program airs on Government Access Channel 2 and 602 in HD, or on Radio Access 102.5 FM. It's also available as a podcast on radioaccess.org and as a video viewing link at freetv.org. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of City Current.